Hello and welcome. Before we jump into our episode, I wanted to take a moment to speak to those of you who are looking for resources. Some of you are in therapy or coaching and you're finding that your therapist is nice, but the issue of betrayal or trauma isn't being addressed. You run out of time in your sessions and a lot happens in between sessions, which can feel like progress is stunted. It takes way too long to get somewhere in therapy or coaching. And in fact, if the average couple needs around 15 to 30 sessions, that works out to about 4 to 8 months if nothing big happens in between sessions. And then there are the individual needs that will often require more time. And so that's why we host monthly workshops. You can join us in person here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or online via Zoom from anywhere in the world. And you'll even have access to a pre-recorded version, as well as the masterclasses and small group meetings. This workshop provides you with actionable steps that you can take immediately to see huge changes in your relationship and in how you feel. It's the jumpstart you need. We take what would be months of therapy or coaching, we pull out the most useful and important parts and deliver it to you in a 2.5-day workshop setting. It is truly transformative, but don't take my word for it. At the end of this episode, you will have the opportunity to hear from a couple who came to one of our workshops. These workshops allow you to get what you need without the frustration of lost time and resources. They are private, and no one has to share anything with the group to see results if you don't want to. Although we do find that many couples love that they can make new and supportive friends if they want to. So check it out at healingbrokentrust.com. That's healingbrokentrust.com. Okay, now for the regularly scheduled episode. Welcome to the Healing Broken Trust podcast. I'm Morgan Robinson.
And I'm Brad Robinson.
And today we have a very interesting topic, so let's get into it. Brad, as a relationship therapist, you said that every couple you encounter deals with this specific issue that we're talking about today. They just don't have a concept for it or a way to describe or explain it. Can you tell the audience more about that and really what we're talking about today? Give us context.
Yeah, what we're talking about today is the real reason relationships fail. So that's very important. Sometimes people will think, we failed because we couldn't communicate, or we failed because we weren't compatible anymore, or we just grew apart. But the real reason relationships fail is there's usually an attachment injury that's there. And that's what leads to this disconnection. And these attachment injuries could be big things, like an affair, or they may be not as impactful as an affair, but they're still very impactful. They create a loss of trust, like financial infidelity, like somebody spending money behind their spouse's back, maybe gambling, maybe drinking, not showing up in a key moment for their spouse. They feel like betrayal. They feel like abandonment. They feel like desertion. And when somebody's on the receiving end of an attachment injury, what it results in is a shattering of assumptions. We were that couple that was never going to go through this. We were always safe and good for each other. That's one shattered assumption. Another is that you're picking me for me, that you want me for me, that I'm safe with you. And so these assumptions that get shattered can be many different forms. But at the core of this is shattered assumptions, deep wound, and as a result, we still may love our spouse, but we don't necessarily trust our spouse. And infidelity is only one type of this. But the core feeling is abandonment, betrayal, desertion.
Yes, absolutely. And so another thing that maybe we can touch on is what are actual predictors of divorce? If it's not communication or we, grew apart necessarily, can we just review what the predictors of divorce are, those 4?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there was a researcher maybe 25 years ago, 30 years ago, who came up with a list of 4 signs that he calls the apocalypse, 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And there's 4 things. It's criticism, defensiveness. And it's not just having that in a relationship, it's getting stuck in that in a relationship. And what he says is that when people have criticism and defensiveness, even healthy couples will have a little bit of that. But this is where we get stuck in it, which is different.
We don't repair.
Yeah, we're not able to repair. Now, the third predictor, so you have criticism, defensiveness. The third predictor is contempt. And contempt is a feeling of moral superiority. It's, I'm better than you. Our values are different. And
I would never do what you did to me.
yeah, or I would never do something like that. And then the last is stonewalling. And stonewalling is what we do when we're the recipient of somebody else's contempt. The researcher says that when contempt shows up, 94% of the time, this is what predicts divorce. And he was a researcher. I'm a clinician. I'm on the front lines. I'm treating people. He was observing people, interviewing people. And back then, I don't think they knew to look for something like this. And my understanding of his research, this has never come up. It's the idea of attachment injuries. I've only seen contempt after there's been an attachment injury. And when people have an attachment injury and that contempt is present, what they'll say is, I would never do this. What kind of person does this? Who are you? I would never do this. What kind of person does this? How did this happen? Things like that. But they're not asking it inquisitively. They're not asking it like, the way you might ask somebody like, well, how did this happen? You're kind of from a gentle place. They're asking it because they're hurt and they're angry and they're disgusted and they're repulsed.
So instead of what caused this to happen, it's more like, why did you do this to me?
Yeah, exactly.
The 4 predictors of divorce are the things that cause attachment injuries, or they're also a result of attachment injuries, or both?
No, I would say they're not really what leads to an attachment injury. They're the signs of an attachment injury.
Or that there was an injury.
Yeah.
So,
So people can have criticism and defensiveness, but when we get stuck in it. So there's another researcher who says that you see criticism and defensiveness as kind of inability to repair, like you mentioned, where we get stuck in this negative cycle, this conflict that we can't seem to get out of because there's an unhealed injury.
Right. And that's how they're trying to heal the injury. They're using faulty methods.
Yeah. And that contempt, like you said, is it's not inquisitive. They're not like, why did you do this? It's more accusatory contempt. And here's the kicker with contempt, is it can be what I would say introverted contempt and extroverted contempt. Introverted is where the person doesn't really express it. It doesn't really get brought up in conflict, or it doesn't really get brought up in a relationship. And the reason for that is the way that the recipient of that injury deals with it is more just trying to block it out of awareness, trying to bury it, compartmentalize it. They're just kind of the person that just tries to just plow ahead. They don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, even though it's a big event. They don't want to overplay what happened to them. They want to downplay the seriousness of it. And then you have more extroverted contempt. And extroverted contempt didn't always come across this way, so it can at times come across as verbal abuse. It can come across as criticism, intense tone. And then you're going to have this continuum in the middle. So get extroverted contempt, really loud, demanding, blaming, critical, no benefit of the doubt. Who are you? What kind of person does this? Loss of trust. Very on one end extreme. And then on the other end, you're not even going to really know that it's there. And that's very serious because you don't even know sometimes that you did something to somebody and they don't ever tell you.
Right.
And if you don't know, you don't have a chance to repair it.
Yeah.
And in some ways, even though over here on the other end, the extroverted contempt, it's out there, but at least you know it's out there. You know you got a problem, you can deal with it, you can address it. But introverted contempt, you don't even know they're upset. You don't even know that you hurt them. And so when that happens, people really struggle. Not everybody who is on the receiving end of an affair, who's been cheated on, has contempt. That's very important. So not everybody who has their trust broken by their spouse or has their trust broken by an injury will develop contempt.
I heard that there was a study on assertiveness. They were saying that people will measure themselves as a lot more assertive than what other people will say that they are. If they're describing their problem, maybe this introverted person, maybe they're thinking, oh, I'm telling you this. I've been telling you this for a long time, but you're like, I've never heard you say this at all. But to them, they may have told you, but to you, they may not have at all, and vice versa, So it's interesting how that works out.
Well, if, we're busy, we live our life, we're all busy, especially if you have family. And if somebody's not kind of grabbing you by the shirt collar, saying, hey, listen, this is a big deal. I need you to really hear me. We're often going to not really fully hear it.
Yeah, or even if if you're used to criticism from them,
Oh, yeah.
you may still not hear it because you're just used to the upset tone. You kind of start to drown it out.
That's very true. Like, it's just like, okay, another thing you're unhappy about.
Yeah.
And so, Morgan, these injuries, so not everything is going to lead to contempt. But what's more likely to lead to contempt is when you have a series of injuries. So it's infidelity plus trickle truth. Like, I've asked questions and the story gets revealed over time. That's more likely to create contempt because you just didn't tell me, you withheld it. Or maybe that plus something else that's happened. Like, you've had a drinking issue or you've had other issues in the past. Now that this affair has happened, now contempt is likely to emerge. But it doesn't always mean there's going to be contempt. It depends on the individual, and it depends on our background. Do we have attachment injuries from previous relationships? Have we been hurt by our parents or exes or other people in our life? And the more injuries that we have, the more we're going to hold ourselves in contempt. And that's really important because really this contempt gets expressed towards our spouse, but who we're holding in contempt first is ourselves.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Like, there's usually an element, I'm speaking generally, but usually there's an element of self-blame. Somehow I wasn't enough. Somehow I brought this on myself. Somehow I wasn't good enough. And so that contempt is really, 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 really serious because it predicts divorce. And if we're listening to a podcast like this, if we're, working on a relationship, we probably don't want a divorce. So we want to deal with our contempt. It's kind of a feeling that we don't like. And so a series of injuries can create contempt, or one big injury can create contempt. I had a client one time who sold some property and got a lot of money out of that, and then he ended up spending it all. And that was supposed to be their retirement. And it left him in a really big pickle because now he doesn't have an ability to retire, and he's going to have to work longer. And his wife had no idea any of this financial stuff was happening in the background. That was one big injury, and it really created a lot of hurt for her. And then what also leads to contempt is over time, so that you have a series of injuries, you have one big injury, but as time goes on, if those injuries don't heal, that can also lead to contempt. Here's how we usually discuss an attachment injury and how we heal from an attachment injury. The person who got hurt is heated about it. They're maybe accusatory. They have more catastrophic thinking, catastrophic language, like, you've never loved me. It's more like we're driving off a cliff. I don't know why I married you. My dad told me warning signs, that kind of thing. So there's kind of more like extreme thinking. And the person who's on the receiving end of that, who committed the offense, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No. It's not like that at all.
Right.
Like, me blowing the money wasn't about not loving you. It was about something else. I had a problem or whatever it is. And so what they do is they start to try to interject their thought process into their spouse. They're trying to convince their spouse not to see it that way. And what that comes across as is defensiveness. And so you have an issue with me, I become defensive or I minimize it. No, it's not as bad as you think it is. And what I'm not doing is I'm not adequately expressing care for your pain. And so as a result, this injury doesn't get healed. It gets minimized. I was told of a story yesterday, or recently I should say, of a client who had gone to therapy years ago, and the therapist had heard about this attachment injury and minimized it. And then began to act like this person had the problem, and they're going to couples therapy. And so that's one of the ironic things about this is many couples therapists, and I would say most, don't even have the concept of an attachment injury as a part of their work with couples. They don't even know that this is an issue. But this is often what drives people to come to therapy. They're focused on you can't communicate or connect, but they don't realize that there's like a 98% chance that there was an attachment injury between the couple at some point in time.
Right.
Could have happened in the last couple of months, maybe even a few years ago, or maybe even 30 years ago. But they're focused on, teaching you how to use I statements and things like that. And that has a place, but that is not how we heal ultimately. That's definitely not how we connect. And so these attachment injuries are what creates contempt.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And oftentimes the therapist will start to blame one person over another on accident, not even really intending to, but because they're searching out the problem, and the problem is often in the one person, and they forget that it's between the couple, it's in the relationship, it's the dialogue. So these injuries leave relationships stuck in negative cycles, right? So we've talked about that in this podcast quite often. The injuries could be from our past relationship or a childhood traumatic event that generates serious trauma. And then it's those little traumas over time where it's the breakdown in our connection. Okay, so I want to ask you, how does a person or relationship look before an injury, and how does it look after an injury is present?
Okay, really good question, Morgan. So before there's an injury, and this is before a childhood injury, before a relationship injury between us, or before maybe a relationship injury with an ex, what we look like is we are comfortable with emotional closeness with others. Vulnerability is something that we're okay with. We're able to establish emotional intimacy. We don't have fear. Fear is not a part of our lives, part of our relationships. Like, we're not afraid of getting too close. We're not afraid of getting abandoned. We're also comfortable being alone, which is different than an avoidance of getting close or intimate. So we're comfortable in our own skin. That may mean, being alone, that kind of thing, which is completely different than an avoidance of intimacy or closeness. We have a positive self-image, and we have positive images of our spouse or a partner.
We can give the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. We're warm and open to other people. We're even able to accept criticism without significant distress because we feel lovable on the inside. We haven't been hurt yet. So criticism isn't threatening to us. We have a strong sense of self, meaning we have a strong sense of boundaries. We're able to say no. We don't fall into people-pleasing, things like that. We have self-esteem. We feel good about ourselves. We have self-awareness. We understand how we feel. We're able to reflect on feelings and emotions. And we're able to trust in a relationship. Our relationships tend to be stable and lasting. They're not emotional roller coasters. We're open with others about feelings because there isn't a fear of being judged because we haven't had that experience. We're not afraid of being abandoned or looked down upon. The best way to describe it is we're without fear. We're open with others about our feelings. There's positive feelings that we have about the relationship, and we have a balanced experience of emotions. We don't have too many emotions or not enough. And then we value our relationships. That's really important. So that's how we are before. You mentioned the ability to repair. That's also a sign of feeling secure because the benefit of the doubt is there. But whenever there's an injury, whether it's a childhood injury that we bring into our relationship, or it's an injury that happens between us and our spouse or a partner, what ends up happening is that ability to repair gets much harder. That benefit of the doubt isn't there. Those shattered assumptions have occurred. And so there's a loss of innocence. There's a feeling of not being chosen, feeling of being betrayed. And now we go into maybe more obsessiveness, where we kind of ask a lot of questions. And that's really a form of anxiety. We're trying to ask questions, get the facts, gather information, because we think the more we know and the more we understand, the more we're going to prevent it from happening again, the more we can move on. If it's, I just find that last little piece, then I'll be able to put it to bed and put it behind me. And it doesn't work like that.
And anxiety is another word for fear.
Exactly. It's actually, the definition of anxiety is the fear that something bad is going to happen. That's the definition of anxiety. And so you're back to your question, though, too. So that's what it looks like before an injury happens in our past or with our spouse or someone else. But when it has happened with our spouse or as a child, when there's a significant enough injury or series of injuries, what ends up happening is we kind of get into more of a dismissing mindset, an avoiding mindset, minimizing mindset. And so what we end up doing with our relationship is there's an avoidance of getting close or intimate. So if I get too close, I get hurt.
And something that's interesting, I heard someone say the other day, I don't drive on highways. So it's not just avoiding people, it's also building your life around this trauma. You build your life around keeping yourself away from having to deal with that hurt or that pain, so much so that you don't even drive on highways. This person, nurse their wounds with things that might seem crazy, but really it's logical. Another person said they worked in a in-person ward for mentally ill people. And the person, every time it was nighttime, it was time to close the doors, they would try to kick out their window. They would always kick out the window of their room. And to an outsider, you think, well, that's crazy. Doesn't make any sense. But we always do logical things. We just have to ask the question, well, why is that happening? Why are they doing that? And when someone finally thought, okay, well, let's ask them, why are you kicking out the window? He, in his mind, in his psychosis, he thought, I feel like when the doors close, the air is sucked out of the room. And so naturally, you would want to kick out the window to bring air in the room. And so, if you are avoiding these issues, you have to ask yourself, well, what can I do to deal with these issues? What can I do to face them head on? So it's just very interesting what you're saying.
Yeah, because back to your point, though, one of the symptoms of trauma is avoidance.
Yes.
And so we tend to avoid what traumatized us.
Right.
Now, a lot of people who have an attachment injury that's especially recent and huge, like infidelity, what they're going to do is they're going to obsess about it. They're going to ask a lot of questions. That, in a way, may be a form of avoidance. I know it doesn't feel like it because it's like I'm talking about it 24/7. I'm asking questions. I wake up my spouse in the middle of the night and ask questions about it. But it can be a form of avoidance because what I mean by that is what helps us heal is actually embracing what happened. It's going and confronting that memory of what happened and reviewing it almost as if you're watching a scene from a movie. Like you're just kind of replaying it in your head. One category of ways that we deal with an injury after it's happened is we avoid any reminders of it. We avoid, situations, or we develop kind of almost rules, like you're describing, like I shouldn't ride on the highway anymore.
Because it hurt me in the past, or I was hurt somehow in the past because of that,
Yeah.
and we create our life around it.
Yeah, you almost like develop these rules. But there's an avoidance of getting close or intimate because I got hurt, either from a parent or an ex or with my spouse. So there's an avoidance of getting close. So I'm going to avoid that now in the future. And now, because of that wound, there's going to be a discomfort with closeness. I'm going to even have ambivalence about it. Do I want to really let this person get close to me? Do I not? And when people have that, when they had that as from a childhood injury or a previous relationship injury, like maybe we divorced our ex and then I get remarried, it may show up as a fear of commitment. Or if I've been injured as a child, it may show up as a fear of commitment. It's going to show up like that. Right. Then there's dismissing behaviors where I'm avoiding my emotions and I'm going to dismiss your emotions. So I'm going to minimize your feelings. I'm going to downplay where you're coming from.
Because it keeps me safe.
Yeah, because it keeps me safe. I'm uncomfortable. But also, it's more than that, though, too. It's we tend to do what was modeled to us. So the injury that we have as a child may not be some big, scary, horrible memory. It may just be like a caregiver that deprived us of just warmth, who wasn't really affectionate. Or if we scraped our knee, got angry with us, or was rejecting, and did those things in consistent ways. So it may not always be like this huge thing, but it is, we're deprived of that kind of emotional sensitivity, emotional support. That can be something that creates this more dismissing attitude. Now, then we have aloofness. We have contempt for others because it's like, you ought to just be strong. I've had to soldier on. I've had to just build myself up by the bootstraps. And so we can kind of almost not have empathy for others. I had to be strong. Nobody was there for me. I had to move forward. So we kind of push that on to other people. The problem is when I've hurt my spouse and then I have that attitude, it ain't going to heal. We're not going to move forward. They're going to be left bleeding. It sure doesn't build trust. There's going to be a mistrust about depending on other people. It's going to be hard to depend on others. There's going to be a difficulty in getting close. There's going to be a preference for remaining distant. I'm safe when I'm distant. There's going to be a fear about closeness, a lack of emotion, or even a minimization of emotional expression. So I'm not going to really have a lot of emotions that I share or feel. And especially a discomfort with opening up, especially about private thoughts. We will pull away if someone gets too close, especially early on in a relationship. And this is where injuries can get created if we have this style where somebody likes us or loves us. We may be the one who pulls away. And that can create injuries in that other person. And then we can kind of feel like we're self-sufficient. I don't need anybody. I'm on my own. I'm an island. I don't need anything or anybody else. I'm all self-sufficient. It's an illusion. We're not. Nature did not make us that way. And then There's a technical term called alexithymia, and what that means is it's a trauma symptom where it's really difficult to recognize our emotions and bodily feelings. So when we're really anxious, we may not even realize that we're anxious. Other people around us will see it. We won't recognize it because we've had to turn off our emotions to get through that trauma in the past or, in our relationship. So that's kind of the first way that we deal with it. Another way that we deal with it is more of an anxious way where we're preoccupied with it. And this is an excessive worry about the relationship or relationships in general. I'm worried, does this person like me? What do they think of me? And we worry that our partner won't care as much about us as we do them, that they're going to get bored with us.
Yeah, and earlier you said sometimes talking about it is a form of avoiding it, which is probably more in this anxious category, because sometimes we'll talk and ruminate about the same thing over and over and over, but we're not actually dealing with it. We're just talking and asking, which it is for someone who's just discovered betrayal. It's normal because it's like this, a gun just went off by your head and you're like, whoa, totally dysregulating. And so that's normal in the beginning. But then there's a time where you actually start to do the deep work and you start to really heal and deal with things. But sometimes people don't want to do that. So they kind of stay over here in this place where they are comfortable, which is just, why did you do this? Why did you do this? Why did you do this? Or they'll ask the questions over and over. Not that that's wrong, but at some point we have to move through that, not past it, but through it, so that we can get to the deeper work.
Yeah, we have to heal from it. And that has a place, asking questions and understanding the why. But what people typically think is if I understand it, or if you were being honest with me, or if I just had this last shred of insight, then I could move past it. And that's not how it works. You're dealing with a trauma. And trauma doesn't heal by gathering information. Right. Trauma heals by embracing it, feeling the feelings that trauma brings.
Right. It's a different part of the brain that you have to engage to get it to a place of healing. Yeah. So what's next?
That's kind of I'm giving kind of an overview of it, but there's more to healing, but that's a big part of it. So part of this is there's an obsessive preoccupation with the relationship where we're, really occupied with it, like you're describing, like thinking about it. Do they love me? Do they not love me? How do they feel about me? We're really ruminating about it. There's an excessive need for approval where we really want them to like everything about us and dote on us. We need constant reassurance. We may even at times ignore the signs of trouble in the relationship. So when we have this anxious, preoccupied way of dealing with a trauma, we have been abandoned already. We have been maybe hurt in the past. But we have a fear of being alone, and that's part of why we ignore warning signs in a relationship. So I don't want to be alone. I don't want to get, rejected or that kind of thing. And so we'll overlook things at times.
And it's interesting, as you say that, past injuries can make us more vulnerable to new injuries. And some of that is if you haven't dealt with those past injuries, new injuries, they happen. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, but part of why that happens is these are coping mechanisms that I'm discussing, how it looks in a relationship. These are all coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms. And if I'm busy defending myself, what that means is I'm smothering you or I'm hurting you. I'm ignoring you or I'm smothering you.
That's how it looks.
And, that's how it looks. And it ends up hurting their spouse. And so it creates injuries that way. What I'm describing are different types of self-preoccupation. I'm either avoiding you, I'm either kind of minimizing your pain because it makes me uncomfortable, or I feel these things and I'm almost kind of preoccupied with myself. I'm afraid of being alone, so I'm preoccupied. What that may lead to is controlling behavior, accusations, expressing doubts. You don't really love me, you don't really care, you didn't do this for me. Those kinds of things. And enough of that, it can create injuries.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Especially with somebody who has their own set of injuries. But I want to get back to this kind of this list of things that we do, the other way that we deal with it. So you got the avoidant list that we went over, and then we kind of have this anxious where we become preoccupied with the injury. And what we do there is we have a fear that we're scaring people away. I'm too much, or I'm not enough. But there's a fear of scaring somebody away. There's a fear of abandonment, rejection, and criticism. So we work really hard not to be criticized or rejected, but there's a fear there. And that's really what drives this. Resentment, when our partner spends time away from the relationship, you should be here with me, but there's a resentment that's there.
Or even anxiety about that, because that's maybe what happened when the affair was going on.
Yeah, or the other injuries that may have happened. If we withdraw, it's more of an angry withdrawal. We're frustrated if our partner isn't available to us. We feel extremely upset and depressed when we receive disapproval. We're never going to have our spouse always happy with us. You're going to be with each other for life. And so there's going to be periods, low periods or high periods. But during some of these low periods, this more anxious style is going to hit it harder with them. They're going to personalize it more. And so will the avoidant style. They're going to feel like, I should make you happy. You should never be unhappy. If you're unhappy, I'm failing you somehow. And then the anxious style, they're going to feel more upset when you're not really available to me. They're going to be more sensitive to those things. This type of person is going to be more easily upset. And they're going to also have more intensified displays of distress or anger. So they're going to be more prone to anger. Jealousy is going to be a factor. They're going to be more jealous of other people or who you spend your time with. They have a fear of being alone. They have compulsive caretaking. They can kind of like almost smother you with their caretaking because they don't want you to abandon them. They want to make sure they show up. They can maybe be submissive or acquiescent, suggestible. Again, they don't want to be too much. They don't want to scare people away. So they may kind of, go along to get along, so to speak. They may seek closeness and connection at the expense of their own independence. They may have a need for excessive reassurance because their baseline is I'm going to be betrayed or I'm not enough. They've had a hurt from within the relationship or from their past. They're going to have a need for excessive reassurance. They're also may be more likely to be clingy, demanding, nagging, and sulking. They may do those kinds of things because it's like, pay attention to me. Give me attention. Notice I'm here.
Yes, and they're going to try to force responses from their partner that way.
And then the other thing on this list that we have is they can, because of this injury, because of their hurt, they may be more self-centered. They may show off more. They may want to be the center of attention because if I'm, the center of attention, if I'm a prize, then I won't get abandoned. People won't leave me.
They'll love me.
They'll love me. That's a good way to put it. And then, Morgan, another category, I'll just go over this one briefly, is what I would call a push-pull dynamic, where I want to get close, but I'm afraid of that closeness. So avoidance and dismissing is all about not getting too close. But this push-pull dynamic, there's a fear there, but it's a mixture of the avoidant and anxious preoccupation. And so I want to get close, but when I get it, I get scared of it.
So I might respond. I might lash back.
Yeah. And so that's part of what gets tricky about healing from an affair is even when you're doing a good job in helping me heal, I'm actually scared of that closeness I want with you. I had security with you before this affair happened. And now that is terrifying for me. Now that is actually triggering for me. And so these traumas have to get addressed.
So it's like, I want this, give it to me. Oh, wait, you're giving it to me. Go away. I don't trust it. It's very scary.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it gets discouraging because I'm trying to help you heal, but I'm not getting anywhere.
Thanks for joining us today. We're Brad and Morgan Robinson from healingbrokentrust.com. If you would like help to work through injuries like the ones we talked about today, you can go to healingbrokentrust.com. We have a workshop. You can come in person. You can join online through Zoom. You can even watch a pre-recorded version as well. So listen to this couple's experience with the workshop.
The workshop for me, I was reluctant at first to come to the workshop. I was thinking, this is 3 years later. I've read a lot of books. I've been through other workshops, and I thought, if I go to this, is it going to make a difference? How is it going to change where we've been, what we've gone through, and that hopeless despair feeling? I was just reluctant, and I wasn't sure that anything really was going to help at this point, because after 3 years of working at this, we were caught in such a negative cycle that the workshop, reluctantly, as I came, I realized, oh my God, this is really exactly what we need. And everything that we covered reflected where I was at, and I could identify with it, and I could see exactly where I fit in that. I understood my spouse better. I understood why her reaction to me and why we were caught in that negative cycle continued. We were unable to address the trauma, and the workshop really works smoothly, efficiently, and works right through and gets right to the point that above and beyond just your marriage and all that's happened is this issue of trauma in your life. And the workshop covers that, and it really went very smoothly. And I came out of it feeling 100% better, that I understood my wife, I understood myself better, why I did what I did, and I really was able to let go of shame and a lot of remorse over not only my behavior, my thoughts, everything I had done in the past, but how my entire life from childhood contributed to what my actions would be later in life. What do you think?
I think the workshop was fantastic. I feel that it taught me how to be compassionate towards him, which I think is a huge healing. It's a stumbling block if you don't have it, and I learned that through the workshop. You seem to hit the nail right on the head with every emotion that I was going through, and it was the first time that I felt understood. And the way you conveyed the information to my husband made me feel that he understood. If anybody knows about these type of situations, having him get it is so important to healing. So I think you did a fantastic job with that.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would say that for me, this affair, infidelity and recovery, I didn't realize that there's so much to this. Simply to say, oh, get over it, or sweep it under the rug, or how many times do we have to talk about this? That's not going away until you address this trauma, and I didn't know that. You don't know what you don't know. You can read all the books you want to read, you can do it, but until this is addressed, to me, it seems impossible to get on it. But through this conference, through Brad, Eric, everybody's talking, the collaboration of folks within the group, I really had for the first time, my wife, I was able to emphasize with her, I was able to feel her compassion towards me that I haven't felt in 3 years, that she understood me and why I did or why I was the way I was. And I was able to look at that and understand her better as well. And then you come out of this thing and you're like, wow, there's more to this. This is not as simple as, therapy where you talk about your marriage. This goes much deeper. And within 3 days, I think we've covered more than we've covered in 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I felt like a lot of my reactions are the problems that we face today. And I needed to recognize that to heal as well and to help him heal.
Yeah, because I don't think you saw me as somebody who needed any healing. Did you?
I knew you needed help, but I couldn't articulate what you should do.
And I got that from this course. I mean, you may...
Yeah, I feel like I got it as well.
What I would say to somebody who is reluctant to attend, because it is fearful, it's the fear of the unknown. We didn't know what to expect, and we're familiar with a lot of this, but because I've been to other conferences, I've been to other workshops, and I didn't want to, that same fear of I'll be exposed, or we're going to rip the scabs off of these wounds, or any number of anxieties and worries. Will this help? Will this finally be something we can sink our teeth into and move along and rewrite our legacy? And coming out of Brad's workshop on healing broken trust, there's nothing like it. I mean, there's activities that you do that really expose, in not a hurtful way, but in a gentle, kind way, all that you've been carrying around with you on this, the pains and the hurts on both sides. They're a radical difference. You almost walk out feeling like, well, you do walk out feeling like there's a lot of hope. In fact, we're confident that, we're on our way. We really are, and we're doing it right. We just need a little more work in the trauma area, but I wouldn't have known that unless I came here.
Wow.
I wouldn't have known what was keeping me in that negative cycle and in this situation was things that affected me early on in life that have been multiplied and impacted over time. And now I'm able to open up a new track. Instead of going around in a circle on a train constantly, I can go this way and get off of it. And it's really a great feeling to know that my spouse, my wife who has suffered with this, can finally get off that track, that rabbit hole of anxiety and worry.
Yeah, I felt like this was our last hope because after 3 years of just doing the same negative circles, you start to lose all hope that there's any type of resolution to this. And so I walked in anxious, feeling like it's going to either make us or break us. We can't go home and continue this. And listening to everything you had to say and understanding why I react the way I reacted to a lot of things has made such a difference. I feel so hopeful. I just feel like we're just gonna start a better life today.
Yeah.
So
I really feel that way.
Yeah, that's really great. Was there any exercises that we did that really stand out to you?
Yeah, we did. We did a few exercises. There was nothing I had to say out in public to anybody. It was all between my spouse and I. So if you're worried about having to stand in front of other couples that you're not aware of, and when you do these exercises, the empathy exercise for me, or my wife's letter to me, where I was able to hear her talk about what she felt, that what hurt her the most. When I heard what hurt her the most, it really hit me viscerally. I could feel it in my whole body. And I really felt the genuine, sincere message that she sent, which was one of love and one of wanting to be with me and one of wanting to work this out. And although you can talk about that in marriage counseling and therapy, unless you're with somebody or you're with a group or in a program where somebody actually has been through this and knows it and understands, it would be very difficult. So I would encourage anybody that's on the fence to really jump into this, take a look at it. It'll save your marriage. It has made a drastic difference in our just within 3 days. I have, in 33 years of marriage, I have not communicated like I have in the past 3 days with my wife.
Wow.
And it wasn't hard to do. It was easy.
Yeah.
Because of the nature and the design of the program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The letter of apology to me was the first time that I think he got the whole scope of how I feel and what this and how it impacted me. And the apology, the understanding really made a difference. I feel like he gets it, which is a big thing in this type of work, is the betrayed saying, you don't get it. You don't get it. You need to get it. I feel like he completely gets it. So I think the letter of apology was a very, very good exercise.
And the
I
letter,
needed to hear it.
but I couldn't articulate that verbally. It's something that through a letter and through the structure of the program, it wasn't just a letter, it was the material that was presented prior to that led up to my ability to actually put that together and express not only empathy, but real compassion.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do it in the beginning. You'd have to go through your program and then do it to have that type of impact.
Yeah, we kind of build up to it just
Yeah.
with a,
Right.
What would you say, just somebody sitting on the fence? I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if it's worth it. I don't know if it's worth coming in person.
I would say, if you want to save your marriage, you need to come here. And if you can't do it in person, then definitely do it by the internet, but you need to be here.
Yeah.
We spent far too much money and far too much time in other areas trying to get help that has in many ways hurt us.
Yes, I would say that you could go down that road of seeing therapists and marriage counselors, but until you get connected, and if you're on the fence, you need to know, or at least my experience has been, that this program is comprehensive. It covers 3, not only just your marriage, it talks about your marriage, it talks about trauma, it talks about the infidelity, but in a way that if you're the betrayer, you get a sense and you get a feeling that Brad and his team are connected to that in a way that they identify or are able to allow you to see yourself and understand, oh, that's why I act this way, or that's why I've been doing this, or I get it now, I understand, and my spouse sees that too. So if you're on the fence, that's not something you get in marriage therapy, at least we hadn't. We talked about our marriage, we talked about communication, but to get to the emotional trauma and what we've been dealing with through infidelity is a whole different
Specifically with
situation.
affairs.
Yeah.
So
That's the lack out there, is that if you don't have a specialist in that area, you're not going to get very
yeah, I
far.
kind of think of it like if you go to your primary care doctor and they talk about something in your stomach, they refer you to a specialist, and it is this is a specialist program. It's where you go for these types of issues.
Yeah, and I'd say if there's no hope, this is the hope.
Yep. If you're sitting there with no hope, this is where you can come and get some hope, and real hope, not just fairy tale
not just
dust.
for the conference. You can go home and actually apply all of this.
Because you're left with materials to take with you, and you're left with a plan, and that plan is comprehensive, and it includes, they don't just leave you to go do what you want. They actually plug you in to activities, programs, and part of the program is,
To further your healing.
to further your healing. Yeah. So it not only impacts you, your wife, your family, but your legacy. You can rewrite your legacy for the rest of your life. It doesn't have to end this way. It doesn't have to be this way. And that's what I'm walking away with today, that we can go forward, rewrite the script, if you will. And the silver lining is, believe it or not, I feel stronger, closer, and more connected to my wife than I have in 33 years on this very day at the end of this program.
Wow.
I have never had that much depth in our conversation. And there's things I've said that I wanted to say or didn't know how to say, didn't know really what it was, but I've been able to uncover all that.
Wow. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Please go to healingbrokentrust.com and you can meet with us personally. We would love to help you in any way we can. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.